I'm not marrying you tomorrow, Caleb. That was how everything shattered, not with a scream, not with a fight, but with a quiet sentence that felt like it slipped under my skin and broke something deep inside me. I stared at Vanessa, trying to understand if I had heard her wrong. What did you just say? I asked, my voice steady even though my chest felt tight. She didn't look at me, her eyes drifting somewhere past me like I wasn't even there. I said I'm not going through with it, she replied, calm, distant, like we were talking about canceling dinner plans instead of a wedding. Riley stepped closer behind me and muttered, "This some kind of joke? Because it's not funny." Vanessa shook her head. "It's not a joke." I forced a small smile, trying to hold things together. "Okay, you're nervous. That's normal. We can take a break, get some air." "It's not nerves, Caleb," she cut in, her voice firmer now, and something in me started to sink. "Then what is it?" I asked, and before she could answer, the chapel doors opened with a slow creak that made every head turn. Derek walked in like he owned the place, like he wasn't stepping into my wedding rehearsal but into something that already belonged to him. Riley scoffed. "Yeah, you're interrupting. Get out." Derek didn't even react, just smiled as he walked closer. "Am I really interrupting, or am I right on time?" Owen stepped beside me, his voice low and dangerous. "You've got 5 seconds to walk out before I make you." Vanessa quickly raised her hand. "Stop. Please. No fighting." I turned back to her, confusion turning into something sharper. "Then tell him to leave." She hesitated, and that hesitation hit harder than any words could. "Vanessa," I said slowly, "tell him to leave." She finally met my eyes, and for a second I saw something like guilt there, but it faded fast. "I can't." Riley let out a bitter laugh. "You can't." Owen shook his head. "What the hell is going on here?" Pastor Daniel stepped forward gently. "Maybe we should pause the rehearsal and—" "No," Vanessa said quickly. "We need to finish this." I felt my heartbeat pounding in my ears. "Finish what?" She took a deep breath. "This isn't working anymore." I stared at her. "We've been together for 4 years." "I know." "We planned this wedding together." "I know." "Then what changed?" I asked quietly because suddenly I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. She glanced at Derek, and that single look told me everything before she even spoke. "I met him a few months ago," she said. Riley muttered, "Unbelievable." I felt something crack inside me, but I kept my face still. "So this just happened overnight?" I asked. She shook her head. "No," that word hurt more than anything else she had said. I nodded slowly. "So you've been lying to me for months." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Owen stepped forward, anger clear in his voice. "Vanessa, you better start explaining right now." She swallowed. "It wasn't supposed to mean anything, but it did." Derek finally spoke, his tone smooth. "You're taking this the wrong way, Caleb." I turned to him, my voice cold. "I didn't ask you to speak." Vanessa stepped in again. "Please don't make this harder." I almost laughed. "Harder? You just ended our wedding in front of everyone. How exactly do I make this harder?" She flinched slightly. "I didn't want it to happen like this." "Then how did you want it to happen?" I asked. "After the vows? After the honeymoon?" She stayed silent. I looked around the chapel, at the guests whispering, at my mother standing frozen with tears in her eyes, at the decorations that suddenly felt meaningless. I felt exposed, like every private part of my life had just been dragged into the open. Pastor Daniel tried again, his voice calm. "We can step outside and talk privately." "No," Vanessa said. "I don't want to hide anymore." I let out a slow breath. "So you'd rather humiliate me in public?" "I'm not trying to humiliate you." "Then what are you trying to do?" I asked. She hesitated, then said, "I'm choosing what feels right." Silence filled the room. Riley shook his head. "Wow." I looked at her carefully. "Say it clearly." Her eyes trembled just a little. "I choose Derek." The words landed like a final blow. Owen cursed under his breath. "You've got to be kidding me." Derek placed his hand lightly on her back, like he had already claimed his prize. "Let's not make this ugly," he said. I looked at him, then at his hand, then back at his face. "You think this isn't already ugly?" He didn't respond. I turned back to Vanessa. "You couldn't even wait until after the wedding to do this?" "That would have been worse," she said quietly. I gave a small nod. "You're right. This is much better." My voice stayed calm, even though inside everything felt strangely still, like the part of me that should have been breaking had just shut down completely. Riley leaned in. "Say the word, man. We'll shut this down." Owen nodded. "We don't have to stand here and take this." I looked at them, then back at Vanessa, and for a second I imagined shouting, demanding answers, asking her to reconsider, but I didn't do any of that because the truth was already clear. She had chosen. And it wasn't me. I straightened slightly and spoke clearly. The wedding is cancelled. Gasps spread through the room. Vanessa blinked. Caleb, I'm done, I said. You made your decision. Now I'm making mine. Derek frowned slightly. You're taking this pretty calmly. I looked at him. Don't confuse calm with weakness. Riley smirked. Yeah, remember that. Vanessa stepped forward. Can we at least talk? No, I said, cutting her off for the first time, and it felt right. I took a slow breath and looked around the room. Thank you all for coming. I'm sorry you had to see this. My mother walked toward me, her voice breaking. Caleb, I'm okay, I said quietly, even though I wasn't, not even close, but I wasn't going to fall apart here, not in front of them, not in front of her. I turned one last time, and Vanessa was staring at me like she didn't recognize me anymore, and maybe she didn't because the man who walked into that chapel believed he was about to get married, and the man walking out of it felt like something inside him had gone completely still. Everyone, please, just give us a minute, I said, even though nothing about this moment could be fixed in a minute. The chapel was no longer quiet. Voices overlapped, chairs scraped, and the soft beauty of the place turned into noise and confusion. Riley stepped forward again, pointing at Derek. No, I'm not giving anyone a minute. This guy needs to get out right now. Owen added, Caleb, just say the word. I shook my head slowly. No. Nobody touches anyone. Riley looked at me like I had lost my mind. You're just going to stand here? Yes, I said, my voice steady. I'm going to stand here. Vanessa took a step closer to me, her voice softer now. Caleb, please let me explain. I looked at her, not angry, not loud, just empty. You already did. Derek crossed his arms. Look man, I didn't plan for it to go like this. I turned to him. You didn't plan this? He hesitated. Not exactly. I nodded once. Right. Julia stepped forward then, her voice sharp. Caleb, you need to stop making this dramatic. Vanessa is just being honest. Riley laughed harshly. Honest? After months of sneaking around? Julia ignored him. Vanessa deserves happiness. I looked at Julia. So do I. She didn't answer that. Owen muttered, this is unbelievable. Vanessa reached for my arm. Caleb, please listen. I didn't mean to hurt you. I gently stepped back, just enough to break contact. That's the problem, I said quietly. You didn't mean anything at all. Her face tightened. That's not fair. Fair? I repeated. You chose him in front of everyone. Derek sighed. You're acting like this is a crime. I looked at him again. No. It's worse. It's a choice. Riley shook his head. I swear if you keep talking, Riley, I cut in, drop it. He clenched his jaw but stayed quiet. Pastor Daniel raised his hands slightly. Everyone please, let's calm down. I turned to him. I'm calm. And that was the strangest part. My chest felt hollow like something had been pulled out, but my voice didn't shake. Vanessa looked at me carefully. Why aren't you reacting? I met her eyes. Because you already made your decision. She frowned. So that's it? You don't even care? That almost made me laugh, but I didn't. I cared enough to build a life with you, I said. I just don't care enough to fight for someone who walked away. That silence hit harder than any argument. Derek shifted slightly. Maybe we should go. Vanessa didn't move. No, Julia stepped closer to her daughter. Vanessa, come on. There's nothing left here. I spoke before Vanessa could answer. She's right. There isn't. I turned slowly, looking at the guests, the decorations, the altar that was supposed to be ours. Everyone, I said clearly, the wedding is cancelled. Thank you for coming. The room went quiet again, but this time it felt different. Not shocked. Not confused. Just heavy. Margaret walked toward me, her voice breaking. Caleb, I'm so sorry. I nodded. It's okay. It wasn't, but I wasn't going to fall apart here. Owen stepped beside me. Let's get you out of here. In a minute, I said. Riley looked at me. You sure? Yeah. Vanessa spoke again, softer this time. Caleb, please don't do this. I looked at her. Don't do what? Walk away like this. I held her gaze. You already walked away. She swallowed. I thought you'd fight for me. That sentence settled something inside me. That's where you were wrong, I said quietly. I don't fight to be chosen. Derek looked uncomfortable now. Good. Julia crossed her arms. Vanessa, we're leaving. Vanessa hesitated, then looked at me one last time. I didn't mean for this to happen like this. I nodded slightly. It did. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Finally, she turned and walked toward the exit, Derek following close behind, Julia right after them. The doors closed and the chapel felt emptier than before. Riley exhaled. Man, I don't even know what to say. Owen placed a hand on my shoulder. You handled that better than I would have. I gave a small shrug. Did I? Margaret reached for my hand. You stayed strong. I looked at her. I stayed quiet. Pastor Daniel stepped closer. Sometimes that takes more strength. I didn't answer. I just nodded. One by one, the guests started leaving, offering soft apologies, awkward looks, quiet support. I thanked each one. Same words. Same tone. Like I was reading from a script. When the chapel finally emptied, I stood there for a moment longer, staring at the altar. Riley spoke softly. You ready? I took a slow breath. Yeah. We walked out together. Outside, the air felt colder than it should have. Owen asked, You coming home? Not yet, I said. I need some time. Riley nodded. We'll be around. I watched them leave, then sat on the steps alone. For the first time that night, I let the silence sink in. My hands felt heavy. My chest tighter now that everything was over. I pulled out my phone and opened my messages with Vanessa. Months of conversations. Plans. Jokes. Promises. I scrolled slowly. There were gaps I hadn't noticed before. Short replies. Late answers. Missed calls. Signs. So many signs. How did I miss this? I muttered to myself. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. No, I corrected quietly. I didn't miss it. I ignored it. That truth hurt more than anything she said. Because it meant I had seen pieces of this coming and chose to believe in something else anyway. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. It wasn't one moment, I whispered. It was months. Piece by piece. Word by word. Distance by distance. I wasn't abandoned in a second. I was erased over time. And somehow, that realization hurt more than the scene inside that chapel. I stayed in the chapel long after everyone left, staring at the half-finished decorations like they were mocking me, when a voice broke the silence. Are you planning to sit there all night, or are you going to do something? I looked up and saw Amelia Grant standing a few feet away, holding a clipboard like nothing unusual had happened. You're still here? I said. Amelia Grant shrugged. This is my job. Disaster doesn't cancel responsibility. I let out a quiet breath. Right. Of course. Amelia Grant walked closer, glancing around at the flowers and chairs. So what's the plan? I gave a hollow laugh. There is no plan. Wedding's over. Amelia Grant tilted head slightly. That's not what I asked. I frowned. What do you mean? Amelia Grant met my eyes directly. Vendors are calling. Caterer, florist, musicians. Everyone wants to know if tomorrow is canceled. I looked away. Yeah, it's canceled. Amelia Grant shook head. That's the easy answer. I narrowed eyes slightly. You think this is easy? Amelia Grant crossed arms. No. I think Vanessa Cole made a very public choice, and now Caleb Mercer is about to make a very quiet mistake. That caught my attention. What mistake? Amelia Grant stepped closer. Walking away embarrassed. Letting Vanessa Cole control the story. I stayed silent for a moment. The story is already ruined. Amelia Grant shook head again. No. The story just started. Right now, everyone saw Vanessa Cole choose someone else. Tomorrow, everyone will talk about Caleb Mercer disappearing. I frowned. So what, Caleb Mercer throws a party after getting humiliated? Amelia Grant didn't smile. Why not? I stared at Amelia Grant. Because that sounds insane. Amelia Grant shrugged lightly. So does letting someone destroy everything and then quietly accepting it? I leaned back in chair. You don't even know Caleb Mercer. Amelia Grant replied calmly. Amelia Grant knows enough. Vanessa Cole didn't just leave. Vanessa Cole did it publicly. That wasn't just a breakup. That was a statement. I exhaled slowly. A statement about what? Amelia Grant answered without hesitation. That Vanessa Cole believed Caleb Mercer would still stay small. That hit harder than anything else that night. I looked down at my hands. Maybe Vanessa Cole was right. Amelia Grant shook head immediately. No. Caleb Mercer is proving Vanessa Cole right by sitting here doing nothing. I looked back up. So what exactly are you suggesting? Amelia Grant tapped the clipboard. The venue is booked. Food is prepared. Guests are already invited. Tomorrow doesn't have to be a wedding, but tomorrow doesn't have to be nothing either. I stayed quiet, letting that settle. You're saying Caleb Mercer should still go through with the event? Amelia Grant nodded. Not as a groom begging for love. As a man taking control. I let out a small breath. And what would Caleb Mercer even call that? Amelia Grant gave a slight shrug. Call it whatever Caleb Mercer wants. A gathering. A statement. Closure. I rubbed my face slowly. This is crazy. Amelia Grant replied, maybe, but it's better than hiding. I looked around the chapel again at everything Vanessa Cole had walked away from. If Caleb Mercer does this, people will talk. Amelia Grant nodded. People are already talking. I gave a weak smile. Fair point. There was a pause, then Amelia Grant asked, so what's it going to be? I leaned forward, resting elbows on knees. If Caleb Mercer does this, Vanessa Cole doesn't get to define how this ends. Amelia Grant smiled slightly. Exactly. I took a deep breath. All right. Amelia Grant raised eyebrow. All right. I stood up slowly. Caleb Mercer is not canceling tomorrow. Amelia Grant nodded once. Good. Then let's get to work. I pulled out my phone. First call is Riley Brooks. Amelia Grant stepped aside as I dialed. Riley Brooks picked up immediately. You good? No, I said. But Caleb Mercer needs help. Riley Brooks replied instantly, say what to do. I glanced at Amelia Grant. Tomorrow's event isn't canceled. There was a pause. What? Caleb Mercer is turning it into something else. Riley Brooks laughed softly. I like that already. Get Owen Mercer, I added. And come back to the venue. Riley Brooks said, on the way. I ended the call and looked at Amelia Grant. Now what? Amelia Grant started flipping pages on clipboard. Now Caleb Mercer calls vendors and tells them the event is still happening. I nodded slowly. Right. I dialed the caterer next. Hey, yeah, this is Caleb Mercer. Plans changed, but don't cancel anything. Same time tomorrow. I hung up and moved to the next call. Florist? Keep everything as it is. Another call. Music? Still needed. Each call felt like I was rebuilding something piece by piece. Amelia Grant watched quietly, then said, that's the difference. I glanced at Amelia Grant. Between what? Amelia Grant answered, between someone who got abandoned and someone who refused to disappear. I exhaled slowly. Caleb Mercer is not disappearing. Amelia Grant nodded. Good. A few minutes later, the doors opened again and Riley Brooks walked in with Owen Mercer. Riley Brooks grinned slightly. This better be good. Owen Mercer looked serious. What's the plan? I looked at both of them. Tomorrow isn't canceled. Riley Brooks laughed. I knew it. Owen Mercer raised eyebrow. Explain. I said clearly, Caleb Mercer is taking control. This event is happening. Just, not the way it was supposed to. Riley Brooks nodded. I'm in. Owen Mercer crossed arms, then gave a small nod. All right. Let's do it. I looked around the chapel one more time, but this time it didn't feel like a place where everything ended. It felt like a place where something new had just started. Caleb Mercer is really doing this? Riley Brooks asked, pacing in front of the altar, voice filled with disbelief and excitement. Caleb Mercer is really doing this, I answered, holding my phone as another call ended. The chapel didn't feel like a graveyard anymore. It felt like something was being rebuilt, piece by piece. Amelia Grant stood beside me, flipping through notes. We need to finalize the structure. This cannot feel like a canceled wedding. This needs to feel intentional. I nodded. Then we make it intentional. Owen Mercer crossed his arms. Start from the top. What exactly is tomorrow? I looked at him, then at Riley Brooks, then at Amelia Grant. Tomorrow is not about Vanessa Cole. Tomorrow is about Caleb Mercer choosing not to be humiliated. Riley Brooks grinned. I like that already. Amelia Grant added calmly, then the message must be clear. No confusion. No pity. I took a breath. Right. No pity. Margaret Mercer stepped closer, her voice soft but steady. A broken promise should not break a good man. I looked at Margaret Mercer and something in my chest steadied. Caleb Mercer understands that now. Owen Mercer nodded slightly. Then we move forward. Riley Brooks clapped hands once. All right, let's rebuild this thing. Amelia Grant pointed toward the decorations. Flowers stay. Seating stays. But the altar changes. I looked at the altar where everything was supposed to happen. The altar stays empty. Riley Brooks' tilted head. Empty? Yes, I said. That's the point. Amelia Grant nodded. Symbolism. That works. Owen Mercer added, and the guests. Riley Brooks answered, Caleb Mercer handles that message directly. I picked up my phone again. Then Caleb Mercer starts now. I opened the group message and typed slowly, making sure every word mattered. Tomorrow's event is still happening. Not a wedding. A gathering. Come if you want truth instead of pretending. Riley Brooks leaned over. That's strong. I hit send. It needs to be. Amelia Grant said, programs will need to be changed. I nodded. Remove, wedding. Replace it with something honest. Amelia Grant wrote quickly. Title? I paused, then said, closure. Amelia Grant smiled slightly. Simple. Effective. Margaret Mercer looked at me carefully. Are you sure this is what Caleb Mercer wants? I met Margaret Mercer's eyes. Caleb Mercer is sure about one thing. Caleb Mercer will not beg. Owen Mercer smirked slightly. Good answer. Riley Brooks added, best answer. I walked toward the table where the wedding rings were placed. The small box felt heavier than it should have. Riley Brooks noticed. You gonna keep that? I opened the box slowly, staring at the ring. No, Amelia Grant watched quietly. What will Caleb Mercer do with it? I closed the box. Caleb Mercer will return it. Not tonight. But soon. Margaret Mercer nodded gently. That's the right choice. I set the box down and stepped back. Everything here was built on something that doesn't exist anymore. Amelia Grant replied, then rebuild it on something that does. I looked around again. Truth. Riley Brooks said, and pride. Owen Mercer added, and control. I nodded. Exactly. My phone buzzed suddenly. Riley Brooks glanced at the screen. Vanessa Cole. I stared at the name for a second, then answered. What do you want? Vanessa Cole's voice came through, sharp and angry. What are you doing? I leaned slightly against the table. Moving forward. Vanessa Cole snapped. Caleb Mercer is turning the wedding into some kind of event? Riley Brooks whispered, put it on speaker. I did. Vanessa Cole's voice filled the space. Caleb Mercer cannot do that. I replied calmly. Vanessa Cole already walked away. Vanessa Cole doesn't get a say anymore. Vanessa Cole's voice rose. This is embarrassing. I let out a quiet breath. So was yesterday. Silence for a moment. Then Vanessa Cole said, people are talking. Good, I said. Let them. Vanessa Cole sounded frustrated. Caleb Mercer is trying to make this look like something else. I shook my head slightly. No. Caleb Mercer is making it what it is. Vanessa Cole lowered voice slightly. This isn't fair. Riley Brooks laughed quietly. Owen Mercer shook head. I answered, fair ended when Vanessa Cole made a choice. Another pause. Then Vanessa Cole said, softer now, Caleb Mercer doesn't have to do this. I replied, Caleb Mercer doesn't have to hide either. Vanessa Cole's voice broke slightly. Caleb Mercer is doing this to hurt me. I closed eyes briefly. No. Caleb Mercer is doing this to stop hurting. That silence lasted longer. Then Vanessa Cole said quietly, this isn't how it was supposed to be. I opened my eyes. You're right. It's not. The call ended. Riley Brooks let out a breath. That was satisfying. Owen Mercer nodded. Very. Amelia Grant looked at me. How do you feel? I thought about it. Still broken. Then I added, but not powerless. Margaret Mercer smiled softly. That's the difference. I looked at everyone around me, then back at the altar. Tomorrow changes everything. Riley Brooks grinned. Tomorrow tells everyone Caleb Mercer didn't lose. I shook my head slightly. Tomorrow shows Caleb Mercer stopped playing the wrong game. Amelia Grant closed the clipboard. Then we're ready. I took a slow breath and let it out. No, I said quietly. Caleb Mercer is ready. I was adjusting the cuffs of my shirt in the quiet room behind the chapel when the door opened without a knock. Caleb, we need to talk. I didn't turn right away. That's a strange way to start the morning that was supposed to be our wedding. Vanessa stepped inside slowly. Please don't do that. I faced her then. Vanessa looked different. Not stronger. Not confident. Just shaken. What do you want? I asked. Vanessa took a breath. Caleb, all of this, it's gone too far. I almost smiled. Too far. Vanessa stepped closer. This event you're planning, people are talking. Derek didn't expect. I cut her off. Derek doesn't matter. Vanessa blinked. He does matter. I shook my head. Not to Caleb Mercer. That seemed to hit something. Vanessa frowned. Why are you acting like this? I crossed my arms. Like what? Vanessa's voice rose slightly. Calm. Detached. Like none of this is affecting you. I looked at her carefully. You expected something else. Vanessa hesitated. I expected something real. I let out a quiet breath. You got something real. Just not what you wanted. Vanessa stepped closer again. Caleb, listen. Derek was a mistake. I held her gaze. Was? Vanessa nodded quickly. Yes. I didn't know everything. What didn't you know? I asked. Vanessa swallowed. Derek has a history. Derek doesn't stay. Derek moves on. I tilted my head slightly. And you only found that out now? Vanessa looked away. Claire told me. Claire? I asked. Derek's sister, Vanessa said quietly. Claire reached out this morning. As if on cue, there was another knock and the door opened slightly. Vanessa, you left your... Claire stepped in, then paused when Claire saw me. Oh. I studied Claire for a second. You must be Claire. Claire nodded. Yeah. Vanessa looked nervous. Claire, this isn't... Claire cut in gently. It's fine. Claire looked at me. You deserve to know. I gestured slightly. Go ahead. Claire exhaled. Derek does this. Not exactly like this every time, but... Derek chases attention. Derek likes winning. Vanessa shook head. Stop. Claire didn't stop. Derek gets bored. Derek leaves. Derek always leaves. I looked at Vanessa. And you didn't see that coming? Vanessa whispered, I didn't think I would be like the others. I nodded slowly. You thought you were different. Vanessa's voice cracked. I thought Derek meant it. I took a step back. And now? Vanessa looked at me again, desperate. Now I know I made a mistake. I stayed silent. Vanessa stepped closer. Caleb, please. We can fix this. I let out a breath. Fix what? Vanessa frowned. Us. I shook my head slowly. There is no us left. Vanessa's eyes filled. Don't say that. Why not? I asked. Because it's true? Vanessa's voice trembled. Caleb, I was under pressure. My mom kept saying things. Everyone kept asking questions. Derek showed up and everything felt easier. I stared at her. Easier than what? Vanessa hesitated. Easier than waiting. Easier than building slowly. Easier than uncertainty. I nodded once. So you chose easy. Vanessa whispered, I didn't think it would cost this much. I stepped closer now, but not gently. You didn't think it would cost anything. Vanessa flinched. That's not fair. I looked directly into her eyes. You chose someone else in front of everyone. Vanessa shook her head quickly. I panicked. No, I said quietly. You decided. Silence filled the room. Claire stood off to the side watching but not interrupting. Vanessa wiped her eyes. Caleb, I came here to fix this. I asked, or to fix how this looks? Vanessa froze. What does that mean? I continued, you didn't come back last night. You didn't call to apologize. You came back this morning, after learning Derek might not stay. Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it. That was answer enough. I nodded slowly. That's what this is. Vanessa whispered, no. I shook my head. Yes. Claire spoke softly, Vanessa, Caleb is right. Vanessa turned sharply. Stop taking sides. Claire sighed. This isn't about sides. This is about truth. I looked at Vanessa again. I loved you. Vanessa's face broke slightly. I know. I continued, my voice steady. But I'm not going to compete for something that was already mine. Vanessa stepped forward. You don't have to compete. I'm choosing you now. I shook my head again. That's the problem. Vanessa frowned. What problem? I answered quietly, you're choosing me now. Vanessa stared at me confused. Isn't that what you wanted? I let out a slow breath. I wanted to be chosen when it mattered. Silence stretched between us. Vanessa whispered, Caleb, please? I stepped back. No, that single word felt heavier than everything else. Vanessa's voice dropped. You're really walking away? I looked at her, calm but certain. You already walked away. Vanessa's eyes filled again. This doesn't have to end like this. I shook my head. It already ended yesterday. Claire placed a hand lightly on Vanessa's shoulder. Vanessa didn't move. Vanessa just stared at me like Vanessa was finally seeing something Vanessa hadn't seen before. I felt it too. That shift. That distance. I wasn't reaching for Vanessa anymore. And for the first time, Vanessa realized that I wasn't waiting either. "Caleb Mercer, take a breath," Pastor Daniel said quietly as I stood near the side of the chapel, watching guests settle into their seats. "Caleb Mercer is breathing," I replied, though the air still felt heavier than usual. Riley Brooks leaned closer. "This is actually happening." I glanced at Riley Brooks. "Yeah. And Caleb Mercer is still standing." Owen Mercer crossed arms beside me. "More than standing. Caleb Mercer is running this." I didn't answer that. I just looked around. The same space. The same flowers. But everything felt different now. Not broken. Not fake. Just honest. Margaret Mercer stepped closer. "Caleb Mercer looks strong today." I gave a small nod. "Caleb Mercer feels steady." Riley Brooks smiled. "That's better than yesterday." The music started softly, and Amelia Grant gave me a quick nod from across the room. "Time," Amelia Grant mouthed. I stepped forward slowly, not toward an altar of promises, but toward a space that finally made sense. Pastor Daniel stood at the front and began speaking. "Today is not a wedding," Pastor Daniel said gently. "Today is something rarer. Today is a moment of truth." The room grew quiet. I could feel every eye on me, but it didn't feel suffocating anymore. Pastor Daniel continued, "Sometimes life gives loss instead of celebration. But loss can reveal something deeper, dignity." Riley Brooks whispered, "That's a good line." I almost smiled. Pastor Daniel looked directly at me. "It takes strength to walk away from something that once meant everything." Those words hit harder than I expected. I let out a slow breath. "Yeah," I muttered under my breath. Pastor Daniel continued, "And sometimes the greatest victory is not in holding on, but in letting go." I felt something shift inside me, like a weight I didn't realize I was still carrying had finally loosened. Owen Mercer leaned closer. "Caleb Mercer needed to hear that." I nodded slightly. Caleb Mercer did. The event moved forward simply. No vows. No promises. Just people who showed up because they cared. Conversations replaced ceremony. Truth replaced illusion. Riley Brooks clapped my shoulder. "This is better than a wedding." I glanced at Riley Brooks. "It's real." Margaret Mercer smiled softly. "That matters more." As the room filled with quiet conversations, my phone buzzed. I checked the screen. A message from Claire Holloway. I stepped aside and answered. "Claire Holloway." Claire Holloway's voice came through calm but serious. "You should know what's happening." I leaned against the wall. "Go on." Claire Holloway said, "Derek Holloway isn't handling things well." I let out a small breath. "That doesn't surprise Caleb Mercer." Claire Holloway continued, "Vanessa Cole is starting to see it too." I stayed silent. Claire Holloway added, "Derek Holloway has debts. Derek Holloway has been calling people all morning trying to cover things." I frowned slightly. "Debts?" "Yes," Claire Holloway said. "Big ones. Derek Holloway doesn't just chase attention. Derek Holloway uses people." I glanced back at the room. "And Vanessa Cole?" Claire Holloway sighed. "Vanessa Cole is trying to hold it together. But it's slipping." I closed my eyes briefly. "That was fast." Claire Holloway replied, "That's how Derek Holloway works. Fast charm. Fast collapse." I opened my eyes again. "And Vanessa Cole?" Claire Holloway paused. "Vanessa Cole is embarrassed. Not just hurt. Embarrassed." I nodded slowly. "That sounds right." Claire Holloway added quietly, "Vanessa Cole didn't expect this." I replied, "Vanessa Cole expected control." Claire Holloway said, "And now Vanessa Cole doesn't have it." I ended the call and stood there for a moment. Riley Brooks walked over. "Everything good?" I nodded. "Everything is clear." Owen Mercer joined us. "What happened?" I looked at both of them. "Derek Holloway is already falling apart." Riley Brooks let out a low whistle. "That didn't take long." Margaret Mercer spoke softly. "That's what happens when something isn't built on truth." I looked back toward the room again. People were laughing quietly. Talking. Living. And for the first time since everything happened, I didn't feel like I was outside of it. I felt part of it again. Pastor Daniel walked over. "How does Caleb Mercer feel now?" I thought about it for a second. "Not angry." Pastor Daniel nodded. "Good." I added, "Not even interested in revenge." Pastor Daniel smiled slightly. "That's better." Riley Brooks crossed arms. "So Caleb Mercer just lets everything play out?" I looked at Riley Brooks. "Caleb Mercer doesn't need to do anything." Owen Mercer nodded slowly. Because it's already happening. I glanced at my phone again, then back at the room. Yeah. Margaret Mercer squeezed my arm gently. Healing looks good on Caleb Mercer. I let out a quiet breath. It feels better than holding on. Pastor Daniel added, sometimes the strongest response is silence. I looked around one more time, then said quietly, and sometimes, it's moving on while they watch. Caleb Mercer is working too much, Riley Brooks said, leaning against the office doorway while I typed without looking up. Caleb Mercer is working enough, I replied. Riley Brooks walked in, shaking head. That's not the same thing. I finally stopped typing and looked at Riley Brooks. It keeps Caleb Mercer focused. Riley Brooks crossed arms. Focused or distracted? I leaned back in chair. Does it matter? Riley Brooks answered immediately, yeah, it does. There was a pause, then Owen Mercer stepped in behind Riley Brooks. Riley Brooks is right. I sighed quietly. Everyone is suddenly very wise. Owen Mercer smirked slightly. Caleb Mercer just started listening. I shook head. Caleb Mercer is fine. Riley Brooks tilted head. Then why does Caleb Mercer look tired? I didn't answer right away. Owen Mercer stepped closer. Because Caleb Mercer is rebuilding everything at once. I rubbed my face slowly. Maybe. Riley Brooks pulled a chair and sat down. Or maybe Caleb Mercer is trying not to think. That landed. I exhaled slowly. Thinking doesn't help. Owen Mercer replied, it does if Caleb Mercer is honest. I looked at both of them. All right. Honest? Caleb Mercer lost a version of life that felt safe. That's not easy to replace. Riley Brooks nodded. That's better. Owen Mercer added, but Caleb Mercer didn't lose everything. I glanced around my office. Or structure. Control. No, I said quietly. Caleb Mercer didn't. Later that evening, I sat at home when Margaret Mercer walked in with 2 cups of tea. Caleb Mercer needs to slow down, Margaret Mercer said, handing me one. I took it. Caleb Mercer is trying. Margaret Mercer sat beside me. Trying or avoiding? I smiled faintly. Everyone is asking that. Margaret Mercer looked at me gently. Because everyone sees the same thing. I stared at the cup. Caleb Mercer thought love meant giving everything. Margaret Mercer nodded slowly. And now? I answered quietly, now Caleb Mercer sees that giving everything to the wrong person means losing yourself. Margaret Mercer placed a hand over mine. That's a hard lesson. I nodded. But a necessary one. The next few days blurred into work, meetings, and small moments that felt normal again. Then Amelia Grant started showing up more often. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just present. Caleb Mercer forgot to eat again, Amelia Grant said one afternoon, placing a coffee and sandwich on my desk. I looked up. Amelia Grant is keeping track? Amelia Grant shrugged. Someone has to. I took the sandwich. Thanks. Amelia Grant leaned against the desk. How is Caleb Mercer doing? I thought for a second. Better. Amelia Grant nodded. That sounds honest. I asked, what about Amelia Grant? Amelia Grant smiled slightly. Amelia Grant is fine. I watched Amelia Grant for a moment. Amelia Grant doesn't ask questions that don't matter. Amelia Grant replied, and Caleb Mercer doesn't answer questions that do. I almost smiled. Fair. Days turned into weeks. Conversations with Amelia Grant became easier. Not forced. Not heavy. Just real. One evening we walked out of the office together. Caleb Mercer looks different, Amelia Grant said. I glanced sideways. Different how? Amelia Grant answered simply, stronger. I let out a small breath. Caleb Mercer feels different. Amelia Grant nodded. That's what matters. My phone buzzed again. I didn't need to check the name. Riley Brooks noticed. Vanessa Cole again? I nodded once. Owen Mercer looked over. Still not answering? I shook my head. No, Riley Brooks grinned. That silence is loud. I looked at my phone, then placed it face down. Caleb Mercer doesn't have anything left to say. Owen Mercer nodded. Good. Later that night I checked the messages anyway. Multiple texts. Calls. Apologies. Questions. I stared at them, then locked the screen. Too late, I said quietly. The next day, Amelia Grant noticed the change again. Caleb Mercer stopped checking phone, Amelia Grant said. I nodded. Caleb Mercer stopped waiting. Amelia Grant looked at me carefully. That's a big step. I replied, it feels like one. Riley Brooks joined in. What changed? I answered honestly, Caleb Mercer realized something. Owen Mercer asked, "What?" I leaned back slightly. Love without respect isn't love. It's self-destruction. Silence followed that. Then Riley Brooks said softly, "Yeah, that's real." Amelia Grant added quietly, "And now." I looked at Amelia Grant, then at both of them. Now Caleb Mercer builds something better. Owen Mercer smiled slightly. Finally. Riley Brooks nodded. About time. I stood up and grabbed my jacket. Caleb Mercer isn't going back. Amelia Grant asked, "Even if Vanessa Cole keeps trying?" I answered without hesitation, especially then. There was a quiet moment after that. Not heavy. Not painful. Just clear. For the first time in weeks, everything felt simple. Not easy, but simple. And that difference meant everything. I was locking the office door when I heard my name behind me. "Caleb, please wait." I stopped, already knowing who it was, but I still turned slowly. Vanessa stood a few steps away, and for the first time, Vanessa didn't look confident or composed. Vanessa looked undone. "What do you want?" I asked quietly. Vanessa took a step closer. "I need to talk." I sighed under my breath. "We already did that." Vanessa shook head. "Not like this." I looked at Vanessa for a long moment, then nodded once. "Fine. Talk." Vanessa exhaled shakily. "Everything is falling apart." I crossed my arms. That tends to happen when something isn't built right. Vanessa flinched. Derek left. I didn't react. Vanessa continued, voice trembling. "Just like Claire said." Derek stopped answering calls. Derek disappeared. I nodded slowly. "I heard." Vanessa wiped at eyes quickly. "People are talking. Everyone knows." I replied, "That's what happens when things happen in public." Vanessa took another step closer. "Caleb, I made a mistake." I stayed still. "You already said that." Vanessa shook head harder. "No. I didn't understand it then. I understand it now." I asked, "What changed?" Vanessa hesitated, then said quietly, "Losing everything." I let out a slow breath. "You didn't lose everything." Vanessa looked at me, eyes red. "I lost you." That landed, but it didn't move me the way it used to. "You gave me away," I said calmly. Vanessa stepped closer. "I didn't think it would end like this." I replied, "You didn't think it would end at all." Vanessa's voice cracked. "I thought I could fix it later." I frowned slightly. "Fix what?" Vanessa whispered, "Us." I shook my head slowly. There was nothing left to fix after that day. Vanessa wiped tears again. "Caleb, please listen." I was scared. My mom kept pushing. Everyone expected something big, something perfect. Derek showed up and everything felt easy and exciting and different. I watched Vanessa carefully. "So you chose excitement over loyalty?" Vanessa nodded weakly. "I thought it meant something better." I stepped forward slightly. "Better than what?" Vanessa swallowed. "Better than waiting. Better than building slowly. Better than uncertainty." I let out a quiet breath. "So you chose what looked bigger?" Vanessa whispered, "Yes." I nodded once. "And you thought I would still be here?" Vanessa didn't answer right away. That silence said everything. I tilted my head slightly. "Say it." Vanessa looked at me, voice breaking. "I thought Caleb Mercer would wait." There it was. Clear. Honest. Final. I felt something shift inside me, not breaking, just settling. "That's the truth," I said quietly. Vanessa nodded, tears falling freely now. "I didn't think I could lose you." I replied, "You didn't think I had a limit." Vanessa stepped closer again. "I was wrong." I held my ground. "You were." Vanessa reached out slightly but stopped halfway. "Caleb, I'm asking for another chance." I looked at Vanessa's hand, then back at Vanessa's face. "Why?" Vanessa blinked. "Because I love you." I shook my head slowly. "No, you don't." Vanessa flinched. "I do." I answered calmly, "You love what I gave you. You love how safe it felt. But when something else looked better, you walked away." Vanessa cried harder. I didn't understand what I had. I nodded. "Now you do." Vanessa whispered, "Isn't that enough?" I took a breath. "For you? Maybe. For me? No." Vanessa stared at me. "So that's it?" I answered, "That's it." Vanessa shook head desperately. "Caleb, please. I'll do anything. I'll fix everything." I said quietly, "You can't fix what you broke." Vanessa's voice dropped. "Then at least forgive me." I looked at Vanessa for a long moment. "I do." Vanessa blinked, surprised. You do? I nodded. Yes. Vanessa stepped closer, hope flickering. Then we can, I cut Vanessa off gently. Forgiveness is not reunion. That hope disappeared instantly. Vanessa stepped back like the words physically hit. Caleb, I continued, my voice steady. Forgiveness is for me, not for us. Vanessa covered mouth, trying to hold back sobs. I thought there was still something left. I shook my head. There isn't. Vanessa whispered, even now? I answered softly, especially now. Silence stretched between us, heavy and final. Vanessa wiped tears again but couldn't stop them. I really lost you. I nodded once. Yes. Vanessa looked down, shoulders shaking. I didn't think this would hurt like this. I replied quietly, that's because you didn't think it would be real. Vanessa let out a broken breath. I'm sorry. I believe that. That was the hardest part. I know, I said. Vanessa looked up again, eyes full of regret. I wish I could go back. I shook my head. You can't. Vanessa nodded slowly. I know. There was nothing else to say. Not anymore. Vanessa stepped back, then turned slightly but paused. Caleb, I waited. Vanessa whispered, you deserved better. I nodded. I know. Vanessa gave a small, broken nod, then walked away. I stood there for a moment, letting everything settle. My chest felt heavy but not broken. Not anymore. I wiped at my own eyes and let out a slow breath. Some endings hurt, I said quietly to myself, even when they're right. I stood outside the chapel again months later, staring at the same doors that once felt like the end of everything. Riley Brooks walked up beside me and nudged my shoulder. Caleb Mercer is really coming back here? I let out a small breath. Caleb Mercer thought this place would feel heavier. Riley Brooks smirked. And? I looked at the doors. It doesn't. Owen Mercer joined us, hands in pockets. That's because Caleb Mercer isn't the same man anymore. I nodded slowly. That's true. Margaret Mercer stepped closer, smiling softly. Caleb Mercer looks at peace. I glanced at Margaret Mercer. Caleb Mercer is. Riley Brooks crossed arms. That's a big change from that night. I gave a quiet laugh. That night feels like someone else's life. Owen Mercer added, but it built this one. I looked at Owen Mercer and nodded. Yeah, it did. We walked inside together. The space looked familiar, but it didn't hold the same weight. Amelia Grant was already there, adjusting details for the small event we had planned. Amelia Grant looked up and smiled. Right on time. I returned the smile. Caleb Mercer doesn't keep Amelia Grant waiting. Riley Brooks whispered, that sounded smooth. I ignored that. Amelia Grant stepped closer. How does Caleb Mercer feel being back here? I looked around. Caleb Mercer remembers everything, but it doesn't hurt the same. Amelia Grant nodded. That's growth. Margaret Mercer said gently, pain doesn't disappear. It just loses control. I looked at Margaret Mercer. Caleb Mercer understands that now. Owen Mercer added, that's all that matters. The guests for the small gathering started arriving, people who actually knew me, people who stayed. Riley Brooks leaned in. Better crowd this time. I smiled slightly. Real crowd. Amelia Grant stood beside me quietly. Caleb Mercer built this. I shook my head. Caleb Mercer rebuilt this. Amelia Grant looked at me carefully. That's harder. I didn't argue with that. Pastor Daniel approached with a calm smile. Good to see Caleb Mercer again. I nodded. Good to be here for the right reasons this time. Pastor Daniel chuckled softly. And what are those reasons? I thought for a moment. Clarity. Peace. Maybe even gratitude. Riley Brooks raised eyebrow. Gratitude? I looked at Riley Brooks. Not for what happened, but for what it forced Caleb Mercer to become. Owen Mercer nodded slowly. That makes sense. Pastor Daniel said, that's the strongest kind of growth. The event began simply. No big speeches. No dramatic moments. Just real conversations, real connections. I stood there, talking, listening, existing without feeling like I had to prove anything. Amelia Grant walked up beside me again. Caleb Mercer looks different here. I glanced sideways. Different how? Amelia Grant smiled softly. Like Caleb Mercer belongs. I let that sit for a second. Caleb Mercer does. Riley Brooks joined us. So what's the final verdict? I looked at Riley Brooks. On what? Riley Brooks shrugged. Everything. I exhaled slowly. Caleb Mercer didn't lose. Owen Mercer added, but not in the way people think. I nodded. Exactly. Margaret Mercer said gently, winning isn't always loud. I smiled faintly. Sometimes it's quiet. Riley Brooks laughed. That's deep. Amelia Grant looked at me again. What changed the most? I thought about it carefully. Caleb Mercer stopped begging to be chosen. Silence followed that for a moment. Then Owen Mercer said, "That's everything." I nodded. Yeah. My phone buzzed briefly in my pocket. I pulled it out, glanced at the screen, then put it away without reading. Riley Brooks noticed. Not even checking? I shook my head. No, Amelia Grant asked softly, "That's done?" I replied, "That's done." Margaret Mercer smiled. Good. I looked around the chapel one more time. Same walls. Same space. But it didn't feel like the place where I was left behind anymore. It felt like the place where I stood back up. Pastor Daniel stepped beside me again. Any regrets? I thought about it, really thought about it. No, I said finally. Riley Brooks raised eyebrow. Not even a little? I shook my head. Regret would mean Caleb Mercer wishes things stayed the same. Owen Mercer nodded. And Caleb Mercer doesn't. I smiled slightly. Not even close. Amelia Grant stepped a little closer. So what does Caleb Mercer want now? I looked at Amelia Grant, then at everyone around me. Something real. Something steady. Something built right. Riley Brooks grinned. Sounds like a plan. Margaret Mercer added softly, and this time Caleb Mercer won't lose himself. I nodded. Never again. There was a quiet moment after that, not heavy, not emotional, just full. I took a slow breath and let it out. The worst thing that happened to Caleb Mercer, I said quietly, turned into the reason Caleb Mercer became better. Owen Mercer smiled. That's how it works sometimes. I looked around one last time, then forward. Caleb Mercer didn't win because someone else lost. Amelia Grant asked softly, then why? I answered simply, because Caleb Mercer finally chose himself.